Hi, everyone. This is George Cao. Welcome to Our Highest Work. This is a podcast that shares the best ideas about spiritually based success and, more importantly, to create a community of wise and loving mutual help around these ideas. So let me begin with a quote. And this is a quote from Mahatma Gandhi. And he says this: "Keep your thoughts positive because your thoughts become your words. Keep your words positive because your words become your behavior. Keep your behavior positive because your behavior becomes your habits. And keep your habits positive because your habits becomes your values. Keep your values positive because your values become your destiny." Again, that was a quote from Mahatma Gandhi. And here in our highest work community, we encourage each other towards each of our highest calling, your highest work, which is that which is truly and most important, and then to bring that energy and that wisdom into our daily life. So what we're going to talk about today is an overview of the topics of this podcast, and really to launch this community around these topics. There are going to be 6 little topics I'll be touching on briefly. I'll be giving my definition of each, and then I'll be talking about how this community works. While you're listening to this podcast, if you're watching on the video page of it, I would love to see your comments. If you're listening to the podcast and you want to go to the video page to make comments, you can get there by going to www.ourhighestwork.com/1, just the number 1, and that stands for episode 1. So ourhighestwork.com/1. You want to go to the comments page. And a couple of reasons why I love seeing your comments. One is because when I see your comments, I feel like I'm actually making a difference, perhaps, in someone's life with this podcast. That's very meaningful for me. I also love seeing what really resonates with you, because I share a lot of things on these podcasts, and I really want to know what's helping you so that I can share more of that kind of thing in the future. And also, my strength is in speaking, not so much in writing. And what I would love eventually is for this podcast material to become articles, to become books perhaps. By the way, this podcast material is all Creative Commons licensing, so you're welcome to borrow any of the material that you hear and that you see here and use it in your own work. Attribution is optional. I believe in the sharing of the best ideas in the world, and it's better that the ideas get out and people go, oh gosh, I can't share that idea because I forgot who it's from. So for me, anything you hear from me, feel free to just share in the world and help other people. So as I was saying, my strength is in speaking, not so much in writing. So when I do see your comments, throughout this podcast, if you're on the video page, just feel free to write comments, as many as you want. Anything you hear me say, feel free to rephrase into your own understanding. And when I see you rephrase it into your own understanding, it helps me better understand what I've said, but I think it also helps other people learn whatever is shared in a deeper way. And I think it'll help you also learn what was shared in a deeper way because you're reiterating in your own way in the comments area. So again, if you want to comment and you're just listening, you're not on the video page, you can go to ourhighestwork.com/1. That stands for episode 1. Okay, so why am I starting this podcast? Why is this podcast important? What does this contribute to the world of podcasts and video blogs, etc.? So I have been listening to podcasts intensively for over a year now. I listen to a lot of business podcasts. I've listened to a lot of spiritual and business development podcasts as well. I've noticed that there are a lot of business and spiritual podcasts, etc., but very few that actually marry the two frames of reference, the frame of business success and the frame of spiritual development. There are a lot of podcasts that talk about both business success and personal development, but the definition of success is still largely about personal gain, profit, growing your business, etc., which is, again, that's the frame of success in the business world. In the spiritual world, the frame of success is developing one's soul or one's character, one's virtues, to live in one's highest potential in terms of virtues and ethics, morality, and connection with the divine in this life and afterwards, right? So the two frames of reference of success are I found have been quite different. How business people define success, how spiritual teachers define success have often been quite different, and I'm trying to marry them here. I'm trying to merge the two worlds. The other reason is that a lot of other podcasts are filled with sponsorships and commercials, and this podcast I intend to keep advertisement free. And it's a bit of a scary thing for me to say that, because the way that podcasters make a lot of money, tens of thousands of dollars and up, thousands to tens of thousands of dollars a month and up, is by doing sponsorships. Once a podcast becomes very popular, they sell sponsorship spots during the podcast. And I'm not saying I'll never do it, but my intention right now is to keep this as advertisement free as possible, because I believe that for my current level of understanding, I know what is enough for me in terms of income, and I'm grateful that through my own coaching program I've been able to develop enough income, so I don't need to make money from this podcast. This podcast is a labor of love from me to give the very best ideas I can share in the world. I think about my content as a legacy, and so if I always think, if this were the only year I have left to live, what can I possibly share in the world in a way that when this body is gone, the ideas can live on. And that's what I'm trying to do in this podcast, is share the very best ideas. So my hope is that every podcast you hear in Our Highest Work, every time you hear it, it'll uplift you, and maybe it'll help you become just a little bit wiser about how to live your highest potential. So what is our highest work? What is our highest work? And first of all, I want to say that this is an ongoing inquiry. This is hopefully a conversation. I will share with you the best ideas that I've seen, and of course I invite you to also share the best ideas that you've seen in the realm of spiritually based business success. And this could be in terms of spiritual success. What have you learned in terms of growing spiritually? And also, what have you learned in terms of growing in your business in ethical ways? So it could be one or the other, and if you have ideas about how to do both, please share those too. But all three are important: the spiritual success ideas, business success ideas that are ethical, and the combination of the two. So this is, again, I welcome this to be a community conversation. I'm not the only one with great ideas here, and in fact, I know that more minds with more life experience is stronger. So you have so much life experience to share with this community. So I really welcome you. As you watch this episode, as you listen, and you can comment anything that comes to you in terms of things you want to share with the community, ideas that come to you, resources that come to you. Go ahead and share that. So how do I define our highest work? And as I said, this is ongoing inquiry, so it's going to keep developing over time, but here's my current definition. Our highest work is personal development through world betterment. So it is sort of a two-pronged aim. It's investing our precious life energy to make the world a better place. And as we do that, we have to learn a lot about how to make the world a better place, right? And as we do that, we grow as human beings into better and better people. So, and I just want to take a quick moment to thank those who are able to join me live for this video recording and this podcast recording. Thank you to Marilyn and Catherine. Thanks Bob and Jack and Shell. And I know that there are others who are watching who haven't been able to comment, and just thank you so much for joining me, especially for this first ever episode. I really appreciate your support. So, so as we alleviate suffering in the world, and as we uplift the world into higher ways of being, we go through a process that grows our own virtues and our own capacities. Isn't that wonderful? So it's truly a win-win. So that's what I call our highest work. And also, when I say our highest work, it's also important to define what I consider not to be our highest work. There's lots of work in the world. There's lots of things you could do with your time and your energy. And here's what I want to share something with you that I found so profound and so helpful. And this was from a summary of a book called Why We Do What We Do by Edward Deci. D-E-C-I is his last name. And the summary of the book is actually by Brian Johnson. So the irony is I am giving you a snippet of the summary of the book by Brian Johnson summarizing Edward Deci's book called Why We Do What We Do. Okay, so here we go. This particular snippet I found to be so profound and helpful. So, quote, the researchers found that if any of the three extrinsic aspirations, for money, for fame, or beauty, if those were very high for an individual relative to the three intrinsic aspirations, which we'll talk about later, the individual was also more likely to display poorer mental health. Say that again. The researchers found that if any of the three extrinsic aspirations for money, fame, or beauty was very high for someone relative to the intrinsic aspirations, the individual was also more likely to display poorer mental health. For example, having an unusually strong aspiration for material success was associated with narcissism, anxiety, depression, and poorer social functioning as rated by a trained clinical psychologist. And I'll tell you before I go on in this quote, I experienced that myself. A couple years ago, the aspiration for making lots of money was so strong within me that I was stressed out a lot, and I think I was doing things that I look back and I wasn't very proud of. I never felt really good about what was happening. In my heart, I never felt really good about what I was doing in my business. And I've recently made the transition to a more courageous way of following my spirit in my business, and I have been so much happier as a result. And ironically, because of my following my spirit, I've been able to actually create an enough income. Enough is the word, not as much as my peers are making or not as much as I want, but enough income to be happy, to meet all my basic needs, and then to be happy, to have this little bit left over for creative things, but to be genuinely happy. So I can get my own testament is true for this quote as well. So going on in this quote, in contrast, strong aspirations for any of the intrinsic goals, meaningful relationships, personal growth, and community contributions were positively associated with well-being. People who strongly desired to contribute to their community, for example, had more vitality and higher self-esteem. When people organized their behavior in terms of intrinsic strivings relative to the external and extrinsic strivings, they seem more content. They feel better about who they are and display more evidence of psychological health. So when I say our highest work, I hope that we also continually remember the contrast to that which is not our highest work, so that we can, as we continue focusing on our highest work, we can find our greatest, most consistent, deepest happiness there on a day-to-day basis. So one way to think about how to apply this into your own life and your own business is I want to offer you a quick exercise. I've said this before, those of you who have heard me speak elsewhere, that I live as if I am dying. I live as if I'm dying. And so I want to invite you to imagine that this is your final year in this body on this earth. This is your final year, 2014, or whenever you're listening to this. If this were your final year, what would you want to tell all of your friends and your family? What are the most important things you've learned about life and about your area of expertise, your passions? What, if this were your final year on earth, what message needs to be heard more in the world? What hasn't been shared enough? You've seen a lot of other things being shared, but not something that you know is so important. Okay? What ideas need to be shared in the world so that the world doesn't forget? Because the world constantly needs to be reminded. You and I, human beings, have a very strange condition of continual amnesia. Every day we wake up, and because of the media culture around us, because of what we get over email, because of what pressures people give us, because of what people request of us, because of whatever, the things we see, billboards, television, internet, we constantly forget what our highest work is, which is why I hope this podcast will be useful in the world, which is why I'm intending to do this podcast twice a week, right? Just keep remembering for myself and hopefully help you remember what your highest work is. So what needs to be done in the world? If this were your final year, what needs to be done in the world? What problems need to be solved that you would give your all in solving? I encourage you to go and do them. Now, I know one of the common objections to this is I can't go and do these things because I need to get paid. I need to make a living. I need to pay my bills. And I have thought about this, and I'm continually thinking about this, and part of this podcast, of course, is going to be talking about true livelihood. But I've already shared a lot in my content recently about how to make a living enough, not 7 figures, 8 figures, or even 6 figures. Most of us don't even need 6 figures to be quite content with meeting our basic needs. I invite you, if you just go check out all of my free content, from now on, all the content I'm producing, actually since a couple months ago, all my content is free. So go to www.georgekao.com, georgekao.com. All my best content is there. Click on the free tab, and I share with you about how to make a great living, or at least enough of a living, doing what you love. So that's the exercise I want you to consider doing, maybe after you listen to this. Another exercise that helps me to remember what our highest work is to imagine that this were my final day. Imagine that this were your final day. How would you treat the people around you? How would you respond to the emails that you get? Transactionally, I feel so many emails. People write emails as if they were transactional. Like, I got to get this information across. I got to respond. I look at emails as relational. Every email I send is a relationship. That I'm building the relationship. I'm being friendly and warm as much as I can. So if this were your last day, how would you respond to the emails that you receive? If this were your last day, how would you think about maybe there are some people right now that you're judging, that you think they shouldn't be living in the way that they're living or doing the things that they're doing. If this were your last day, how would you want them to view you? How about praying for them, praying for their well-being, praying for their happiness? If this were your last day, how would you show appreciation in the world, and what would you share in the world? Right? And chances are very high that this is not your last day, but treat others as if it were. All right. So now let me give a quick overview of the 6 topics we'll be talking about in the coming weeks and months. And then I'll also give a quick overview of how our community works, and then we'll end this podcast with just about 9 minutes left. So one of the first topics that we'll be talking about, and perhaps the most important one, is spiritual development. Now, I know that each of us listening to this probably has a different spiritual path. Some of us share the same spiritual heritage. We may be Christian, we may be Buddhist, or follow the Buddhist philosophy. We may be Hindu, we may be a Taoist, we may be Jewish, we may be Muslim, we may be a different faith or a different path. It is my belief that reality, true reality with a capital T, true reality, I believe it's kind of like a puzzle. And that you have a puzzle piece that is absolutely important for this picture of true reality, and so do I. We each have a puzzle piece. All of us are puzzle pieces, and true reality is made up of this mosaic of each of our experiences. So I welcome you to share what you have learned about spiritual development from your own experience. What has been important What has been life-changing for you? And you can share this anytime in our community, which I'll talk about next on how to do that. And I'm also going to share, of course, what I've learned about spiritual development, because I have looked at, I have delved deeply into the Christian path. I was originally, my parents, my heritage was the Buddhist path. I have some friends who are Hindu. I've learned a lot about this, the quote-unquote New Age paths, and I know some people don't like that term, but some people like it, some people don't. I've read a lot and I've learned a lot, spoken to a lot of people. And so I'll share with you a bit about what I've learned that I hope will inspire and uplift you on whatever path you're on. And just as importantly, I look forward to reading your comments about what you learned and in your spiritual path. What books have most influenced you? What heroes have most influenced you in your spiritual path? What ideas have most felt real and true to you? So please share with me and for all of us in this community. And one little idea I'll share, I'll be sharing lots, of course, in the coming weeks, but one idea I'll share about spiritual development is I think spiritual growth is about learning to discern the difference in different arenas of pleasure, particularly spiritual joy. So let me say this again. In our life, in our human life, there's lots of ways to get pleasure. There's physical pleasure. There's pleasure from the different senses, right? The five, some people say six senses. But there's also a spiritual joy that when you do something out of genuine generosity, when you do something to truly help someone, whether or not they say thank you, when you do something that's your heart is calling you to do, you feel this little sense of spiritual joy. And I think spiritual development is a lot about learning to sense that and living into that more and more and more. And because being in this world, being in this body, there are so many distractions about what is pleasurable, right? And all kinds of ways. But learning the discernment of pleasure in terms of spiritual pleasure, spiritual joy, and learning living into that is really, really subtle. And that's, I think, one of the key aspects of spiritual development. Okay, the second topic we'll be talking about is true livelihood, which is, in short, true livelihood is a career business work that fulfills you emotionally, that grows you spiritually, and meets your financial needs. Again, true livelihood is a career or business that fulfills you emotionally, that grows you spiritually. And this is important because not every single thing you do in your true livelihood business or career is going to be pleasurable. It's not going to be fun all the time. But guess what? As you learn spiritual development, you'll learn to have spiritual joy in every moment, right? The discernment of spiritual joy. And you can learn to have spiritual joy even in the most mundane and mediocre or mundane and boring of tasks or difficult of problems. So again, true livelihood, much of the time you're having fun because you're feeling like you're using your strengths, but it's also growing you spiritually in all ways, even if you're not having fun at the time. And of course, it meets your financial needs. So we are talking not about volunteering here, but about a livelihood. Volunteering is important too, and we'll talk about that as well. The third topic that we'll talk about in this podcast is joyful productivity, which is how to work more efficiently and more joyfully in all that you do, how to be more productive in a mindful and joyful way. There's a lot we can talk about there. Conscious money is we'll talk about, because actually I have found that to have true livelihood, you also need to be good at managing your money in a conscious way. So we'll talk a lot about that. I've already developed some content, free content around that, so please go to, you can Google Conscious Money Flow with George Kao, and there should be a YouTube video or two about this. Conscious marketing, how do we do effective outreach that is truly aligned with your soul's calling? So we'll be talking about that as well. And finally, mindful activism, we'll be talking about how to make the world a better place through your lifestyle changes and then through how you spend your time. So we'll talk a little bit about volunteering as well there. Okay, now I want to briefly talk about how to interact and engage in this community, because this podcast is not just about me sharing with you my experience and the best resources I've come across and book summaries I'll be sharing with you, and I'll interview some of my business and spiritual heroes. But it's more importantly, as I say, I live as if I'm dying. So if I were to leave after a few episodes of this podcast, I want the community to keep going. And my hope is that you'll keep supporting each other. So I encourage you to engage in this community. And there are basically two ways. I'll say there are three ways of doing this. One is twice a week we'll have these live episodes. And when you come to these, if you decide to attend our live episodes, you can comment in real time with others who are also attending. And just as an example, right now I see Jack and Bob commenting, and Bobby is here with us live as well. Rachel is here, Marilyn and Shell, and Karen is here. And thank you all so much. Catherine as well. So thank you all so much for showing up live. So that's one way, and I think live interaction cannot be replaced. So I encourage you to join our live episodes whenever you can. My plan is right now is that they're every Tuesday and every Friday at 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern. But you can find out what the next episode is by going to ourhighestwork.com. ourhighestwork.com, and there's a mailing list. You can join there, subscribe with your email address. It's free, of course. And if you choose to check the box that says you want to be reminded about the live episodes, you'll get an email before each live episode. The second way to engage is in our community discussion forum. And the way to get there is by going to www.ourhighestwork.com, basically our website. When you go there, click on the word community at the top. Okay, click on the word community at the top. And when you do that, you'll see a link there on the community page that says our main discussion forum. Go to our main discussion forum, and in fact, right now I can do a quick screen share to show you what I mean. And in fact, those of you watching the video will be able to see my screen momentarily. Those who are just listening, that's okay. I'm going to speak exactly what I'm showing you. So when you go to ourhighestwork.com/community, on that page there's a link that says our main discussion forum. And when you go there, what I want to show you here, hopefully you can see right there on the screen, is that you can make a comment where it says share your thoughts. Click on that, start typing away. There's a public setting. Public setting is really, I encourage you to keep your comments public so that our highest work members can see what your comment is. If you don't keep it public, then only you and a few other people you share it with can see it, not the rest of the community. So keep it public, which means that just be aware of what you're posting. You can also click the checkbox that says also share on Google+. If you wish to share it on your Google+, the comment on your Google+ profile so that your Google+ circles can see it and maybe they find out about this podcast if they might be interested. Okay, another important thing is under where it says share your comments, right above the other comments, there's a place that says, there's a button that says top comments. Try clicking on that and try selecting newest first. And this will sort the comments by the newest threads that were posted first, or the newest threads that were recently posted. Okay, so invite you to click on top comments, click on that, try newest comments. You can always toggle back to top comments. I'm not sure what YouTube means by top comments. I think they have a special algorithm for that. I don't know, but so newest first is probably what you usually want to look at. Okay, so I invite you to comment there anytime you wish to, anytime during the week. And we are back. Let's see. The third way to engage in this community is when you are either seeing other people comment on the video or in the main discussion forum. You can click on other people's names. When you click on their names, you'll be brought to their YouTube profile, and on their YouTube profile, you should be able to send them a private message. You can also, so in other words, the third way to engage is really to connect one-to-one with other people in this community, because a community is made up of relationships that people have with one another, as well as the relationship that the community has as a whole. So start developing relationships with other kindred spirits that you find, maybe you see their comments and you really appreciate their comments. Oh, that's important too. Whenever you see people's comments here, appreciate them. Reply to people's comments as much as you can with a sense of appreciation, with a sense of gratitude. Maybe you have some thought that you can contribute to the conversation that they're starting, but whether you're contributing or not, always be appreciating, always be saying thank you to them. And that will form a beautiful foundation for the relationship you could have with them. And also, you'll be modeling what being a good community member can be like. So finally, to end this podcast, I think I've probably shared enough. I invite you to go to our community page and engage and reach out there. And lastly, if you would like this podcast's message and values to be shared in the world, there are two things you can do. I'm looking at this as my legacy, so I'm really hoping that this podcast can be as available in the world as possible. And so there's two things you can do. One is to share this episode on social media, wherever you do social media, Facebook, Twitter, Google+, etc. So share this episode if you felt it was worthwhile. And secondly, write a review of this podcast on iTunes. It makes a huge difference. Every iTunes review, imagine when you write a review on iTunes, it's like 10 more people or 20 more people will find out about this podcast directly because of you voting up this podcast by writing a review. That's how powerful iTunes reviews are. It could actually, that number is not exact. It could be 100. From what I've learned about podcasts and outreach for podcasts, it's every review matters so much. So if you want to give this podcast an iTunes review, go to ourhighestwork.com/review. ourhighestwork.com/review. And that's one way you can post your review there. And lastly, as we end this episode, I always want to end it with an inspirational thought, a quote. And what I want to say today to you is that you are loved. You are known and loved and supported. You are guided and uplifted and protected, individually, known by name. And you are loved and guided and protected. And you're always safe forever. That's my belief, and I believe that that's true for you as well. Far beyond what you can imagine, you are loved. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode and in the community. Be well.